Hello, hello, and welcome to Genealogy Quick Start. I am Shamel Jordan, the producer and the host. Today we have two new, spanking brand new, never done before quick starts for you. One is called Prepping Personal Papers, and the other with our super special guest. I didn't tell Dolly this, but I've wanted her to be on the show for quite some time. She is a cemetery preservationist, and she's going to talk to us. She's going to do a quick start called Silent Storytellers, a handbook for cemetery preservation. So let me first tell you, I want to share with you like two books that I always thought were really cool. I got when I was traveling down south. I hope I can show this. One is called Grave Intentions, a comprehensive guide to preserving historic cemeteries in Georgia. So while this is historic cemeteries in Georgia, it is a very nice guide for anyone who is doing cemetery preservation, recording. It has interesting forms for creating data sets. It talks about how to restore cemeteries. And of course, when you think about restoration, there's so much that we learned. I'm going to ask her some questions about things that we might have learned when we first started doing genealogy has completely changed. And there's another thing that hopefully Dolly will get a chance to talk about. This one's called Stories in Stone, a field guide to cemetery symbolism and iconography. And so, is it going to be able to show? Yes, here it is. And so this is another book, and it's quite interesting. All the different stones. It's not just United States, I don't believe, but really cool book about the different icons on headstones. So, hey, how are you today? I would like to now make sure that you know that you can watch us on Facebook or YouTube or Philly Cam. This is actually a Philly Cam show. So without further ado, I want to bring on our regular quick starters. I don't know how they just constantly, they're like clockwork. They're constantly coming up with these wonderful ideas. First up, columnist and editor, James M. Beidler. Hey, Jim.
Hello there. Yes.
Thank you for being here. And next up, we have Genealogy Tip of the Day, Michael John Neal. So, do you
Hello.
know a genealogist who does not like cemeteries? Like, I thought that kind of comes like you have to like hold up your hand and say, "I love cemeteries." Do you know any that don't?
If they don't, they get kicked out of the club. That's that's what we're saying about that.
So, have you guys? Do you guys have any like cool or fun or impactful either tips or tricks that deal with cemeteries in preparation for our special guest today?
Well, I don't have to go any further than Michael's genealogy tip of the day. One of those that was impactful to me was making sure when you go to a cemetery, a lot of times you may have found the grave you're looking for and find a grave already. Make darn sure that you don't just shoot your own photo and go. Make sure you see everybody who is around that, because there could be other relatives or at least people from the community, some of those friends, associates, and neighbors, the fan club. Do it.
Wow, I love that, the Dead Fan Club.
Yes, yes.
Michael, you have any fun either
Well,
tips or tricks?
I would say be on the lookout for living people you might not think will be in the cemetery, because that happened to me once when I ran around the back edge
Ooh.
to do a U to get back on the blacktop. There was a car and a pickup truck in the back of the cemetery having a rendezvous, and it was not what I expected. So you just never know what might be going on. So if you're concerned, some people take a buddy when they go to the cemetery. not just always for safety reasons, but also in case they fall or trip. And if they, there are holes in cemeteries, that might happen, and you want to have somebody there if you're worried about that.
All right, so take a buddy for safety reasons. No.
or if you want that rendezvous.
For some extracurriculars, get your strength up. All right. Anyway, thanks so much for being here. We want to see who we have here today. If you are here with us, please let us know where you are. And if you have a genealogy group or historical society that you're with, please represent. So who do we have here? Oh, Judy, of course.
Judy.
Yeah. Judy from Chicagoland. This week, she is claiming Illinois State Genealogical Society. You notice every time she has a whole different society she's on here. Judy's a junkie. All right. Susan. Hello, Susan from Reading. Okay. We have a local. And how do you say this, Jim?
Tulpahawken, the Tully. The Tully.
Thank you, Susan, for helping me. Like, it's in here, but I get nervous. Hey, Kathy, how are you? Nice to see you. And it's Wanda Looney from Birmingham, aka Cherry Hill Family History Center workshops. Hello, Marion. They'll be banned. Yes, we're banning the people who don't like cemeteries. They're banned from cemeteries. I'm with you, Marion. Let's see. Kathy loves cemeteries since childhood. Us too. Every time we buried someone, we went around and we said hi to everyone. So it wasn't like, it was sad, but we got to say hi to everyone. So hello, Kathleen from Indiana. I so miss Indiana. Are you near Fort Wayne, the Disneyland of the Midwest? Hello, Nadine from Wisconsin, Midwest. You have a great library there as well. Is that the University of Wisconsin-Madison? They have something there that's great. What is it that they have there that's great? Does it have something to do with newspapers or?
I believe so, yes.
All right. Hey, Katie B. What's up, Katie B from HSP? Digging it. Katie just got here and she's cool. She's cool. She just came rhyming, okay, with her business. All right, let's get started with this cool quick start, which you first have to explain to me because it can go many ways. We're talking about preserving papers in cemeteries, and Michael and Jim have a quick start that is called prepping personal papers. So talk to us about this. Where are you going with prepping personal papers? There's so many ways we could do this.
Well, first and foremost, I'm going to say how I'm very jealous that Michael, his family has a lot of papers. I don't want to say that my family was maybe less literate than his. They were primarily farmers and housewives, whereas he's got, well, it was farm ancestors, but basically, farms as a business, not as the little gentleman's avocation that many of mine were, and teacher, some good professions that generate a lot of papers. So yeah, I've got some personal paper envy here.
Yeah.
Well, we'll talk about some of my personal papers in just a minute, but the goal here is to encourage you to give you some ways to think about so you can actually preserve and share those things that you've got. So there's just not that one copy in your basement or wherever that might mean an untimely demise if things happen.
And also do it without that preservation process taking over the entire rest of your life.
Correct.
Yes,
that can happen. That can easily happen if a person is not careful.
Yeah. Well, it can happen, and it also prevents a lot of people from even starting because they look at the tsunami of what they have and just shut the door and don't do anything.
So you're going to help take out the overwhelm of that stack. You're going to take away overwhelm for us today. All right. I knew I could count on you. So let's get started with this quick start. Prepping personal papers, PPP. All right. So, step one is to gather available family papers. So, do you have any kind of methodology for doing that?
I would, depends on how unorganized they are in the first place, but I would get everything in one spot, organize it by family or by person, kind of whichever way seems to make the most sense. You might, or you could also organize it by type. It's not
That's
showing
me. I'm
here,
a type person. I do
but
my stuff by
so that
category.
you do, like I've got a lot of these. You can't. There we go. I've got a lot of these notebooks like this, and this would be one thing to start with. Kind of put them by type, because then you can kind of get in the flow of how you're digitizing one kind of item, and you can just be, like on that Model T production line, you can just start, cranking out images or whatnot, and kind of get in the flow, and then work to a different kind of image that might have a different process and learning curve a little bit to it.
And now it doesn't necessarily apply to gathering, but somewhere in your process, you should also assess, are there family papers in like an archives, either a public archives or a university archives or something like that. Generally, this is if you have some sort of prominence to the family. Like you say, you're not going to gather those papers because you're not allowed to take them. But it's another inventorying step that may be useful to you, and especially if you go back further.
All right, so we are gathering those papers and putting them someplace so that we can work on them. Don't put them like on your dining room table because you need to eat. You can't be moving them around. So put them
Right. And
someplace where
and
they
has been
won't be. Mhm.
and has been suggested in the comments, it's a good idea when you're doing that to make an inventory of all
Yeah.
those items and catalog them as you're going through them, so you know what you have, because it's easy to forget when you're going through things, what you've got and what you don't.
Very nice, an inventory. All right, so let's move on. And the other thing that I really, 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 really liked that you said was that it's not always as prudent to do it by family, because sometimes that's what slows you down, because then you have a big giant family batch. And so category works because it allows you to get into the flow. And really, if you're like a citation hound, boy, does doing it by category help, because it's all the same type of citation, right? All right. So that's step one. And the reason that I'm talking so much is because step two has disappeared, and I am getting step two, which is to, isn't that one like pick a person?
Pick
Choose
out
an
a
ancestor?
particular ancestor's materials with the way we originally wrote. Now, sometimes you can make them a little bit more concise on us, which is a good thing. That's why you're the producer and we're not. But picking out a particular ancestor's materials. So,
All right. So we're picking one ancestor. This is to get rid of the overwhelm. You're not doing everybody. You're
Right.
picking
And
out
even
an
you could,
ancestor.
even after you've maybe organized them or whatever, or even done initial digitization of them, because the ones I've got, I've got so many, I'm not going to scan these. I'm going to use a camera to take pictures of these notebooks that I've got page by page.
Oh,
But
yes.
they're
Someone
working,
asked what they're going to do with those notebooks.
right. And preserving them, they're not, I'm just going to have to keep them in archival envelopes and go from there, because there's too many pages to put each page in some kind of folder or something. But go through one person's papers at a time, in part because one of the things that we're going to talk about is annotating and making comments. And if you're working on just one person at a time, when you go to maybe transcribing or doing some notes on them or whatever, then you're kind of in the flow of that family, and you've got those names and that location, particularly if your people are from different areas. It's just easier to work on when you're doing the analysis and working them up, to work on one person or one family's items at a time once you've got them organized and digitized.
and
All right.
concentrate on what materials might provide the most information, what might what has the most risk of being lost information if those materials are lost?
Oh, yes. You have to prioritize the originals from the, say, copies. Is that where you're going with that, Jim?
Yeah,
Most
yeah.
definitely. All right. So that was step 2, to choose an ancestor and focus on them. And so step 3 is then to preserve without tears. So please, what does that mean?
Well, take it as simple as approach as possible. So for me, for these notebooks, and there's one page for every week. I've got about 14 or 15 of these. And what I'm going to do with these, because it's easier and it captures all the information, is I'm going to take a digital camera or maybe even my phone and take pictures of each page. And then I'm going to go one at a time. These are already in chronological order. And then I'm going to upload those to the cloud. And I'm probably not even going to give, in this case, since there's so many and I'm taking pictures one week after the other, I'm most likely not going to individually give cute names or genealogical names to each of those umpteen bazillion pages. I'm just going to make a folder for 1996 and a folder for 1997, put the images in chronological order, and that's going to be it for my initial attempt to preserve those, because it will take less time than if I say I'm going to scan every page. That realistically is never going to happen. It's just never going to happen.
So
Yeah.
that's where that inventory comes in, so that at
Right.
least you know what you have.
What you've got, right?
Fantastic. And that's where the overwhelm goes away, because you don't feel like you have to do every single piece of paper. Love it. Love it. So then we have no, without tears. So are there any other times when so that was, not trying to eat the whole whale. Are there any other places where it might be hard during your preservation? Like, do you have to, should you put your stuff into like if you have original deeds and stuff, do you guys put them in a like security box or something and keep the copies home, or do you just keep them at home? Like those really priceless documents that you were just originally talking about, Jim.
Oh, I just have them at home. So, of course, I live in a pretty low crime area, so that might be part of that. But,
Cool. Step 4. Step 4 is to annotate for future generations. So enlighten us. What does that mean?
well, the key word for that is annotate. And this again is something Michael has been thought provoking to me on this stuff. Uh, don't take the time to transcribe everything, especially if the handwriting is pretty good. That's the first thing. But likewise, that um, there were many things in those, like people ID'd by just initials and things like that. I think we're going to have an example of that. Things that will be lost to future generations if you don't do
Mm.
this annotation. And that's the stuff you should concentrate on, rather than, again, spending scads of time doing every word transcriptions.
Love that. Anything to add, Michael?
That pretty much sums it up. You want to think, if you're preserving the images of those items, like Jim said, if it's legible, I wouldn't bother transcribing it. Think about what's in your head that the annotations could help somebody later understand those records that is not in those materials. Those are because there's a lot of, we'll see some examples in a second, but that's what you want to do, because if you transcribe it, there so maybe other things that about that, contextual things that you want to add to that.
And if you have your inventory, that's going to have the key things that you would need to know out of that document again. So fantastic. We're annotating, like if there's initials or anything that might be lost. And some of us spend time trying to figure out, why is this person even part of this paperwork? So it would be cool
Right,
to put
right.
down if
And
it's
those
not obvious why this person is in this
exactly,
document,
exactly.
why we have this. Yeah, okay.
You know, if
Wonderful.
you know it's a somebody they worked with, especially if it's somebody that's not biologically related or related by marriage that's mentioned, it could be you know, they worked with grandma for 2 or 3 years and that was it. That detail is probably going to be lost when you're gone. So those are things you want to put in there. I would only transcribe small extracts if something was really hard to read. I've got one where my mom and dad both wrote on the same entry, and I can recognize his and her handwriting well enough that I can kind of sift out what's dad's and what's mom's. So think about, there may be an occasional thing you might want to transcribe, but normally, you know, I would not transcribe. And Marion's asked where to put the annotations. You could put them in the metadata for the individual images, or you could just make a Word, start out with a Word document, save it as a PDF, and put that in the same folder as in my case, I have a folder for every year. I just put the date and my comments about what mom had said on that date and save that as a PDF with the images. But you could also put some things in the metadata as well.
Yeah, I think about my dad's mom, my grandma, and how she kept a diary for many years. And after she was gone, yeah, we did get into those diaries a lot, but most of them were just the weather, how many ears of corn we harvested, But there was one particular one when she, as they used to say, gave up housekeeping and started alternating living between my dad and his brother. She said, "Well, I go to Host no more. Host being the village where she had lived, and I saw some emotion in that. But so that's the type of thing I would transcribe, like if I was doing a biography of her.
And I think Miriam made in the comment a good point, and I think so too. Instead of putting it in metadata of each file, you could do a little bit of that, but just have one big Word document where you just kind of kept a running list of everything. It would be easier and faster for you. You could maneuver through that a little quicker too when you were doing the work, because the goal is, we go back to preserve without tears. We want to make, there's going to be some work, but we want to try to not make it overwhelming to where we don't do it.
Yep.
Exactly. I want to share with you, for some reason, share. You guys have some documents here. Michael has some documents. It is here. Maybe.
This one's a 1940. I'm lucky I've only got one of these because there's about 12 or 13 pages for this one year. But this was in pencil. It's my grandfather's farm ledger. I'm not sure if you can see it. The
I
illustration.
blew it up a little
Pull
bit.
it up.
Okay.
There we go. You can see he's got the car license, the locker rent, and the dues. What you could do. His handwriting isn't too bad. It really isn't too bad. But this is one where I would go through, and something that I thought somebody might not know or my kids might not know, I'll make a comment about what that is. The locker rent, the one real quick one so we don't get too bogged down in this one. It's not the locker at a gym. It's a locker at a processing plant where they had the animals butchered, and then you would store your whole processed calf in that and take out what you needed as you wanted. So those are the kind of things I would make a quick comment on. Um, maybe a name, if I could, he abbreviated with initials, sometimes the first initial. If I knew who that was, I would make a comment about that as well. I didn't
And it's
notice.
fun to kind of look at it and try to figure out, learn like what is all this stuff? Why is it
Right,
on here?
because there's a lot, some things are obvious, some things not. Some things will make more, in this case, if you've got a farm background, that will make more sense. And even then, some of these don't. I had to do a little bit of sniffing around to figure out what some of these things were.
Soil check was quite expensive.
No, that's in the column for receipts. That was a government subsidy. I'm
Oh,
assuming
okay.
something that was some government program. I'd have to do some digging around to see why they got the soil check, so to speak. But that was a government
Hops is
program.
really expensive.
The what?
Hops.
Hop. Where'd you see hogs? Those are 27 hogs from the Carthage. O is for order buyers. And that's a great example of something I would annotate, because when I see Carthage O buyer, I know exactly what that is. O is for order. It's a sale barn. And so that was where he apparently sold some hogs, looks like. This is one of my entries for my mother's day. I call them her day journals. They were a local business gave these things out, and she's got about 12, 15 years of them. This is one she drove to Cahokia. I might indicate, I think, Cahokia, Missouri. My dad called the neighbor. Apparently that was worth putting in there. She must have come up to take care of our kids. And then I had an interview with the newspaper. Kathy noticed the pancake oil. That's a brand
what's
of motor.
Pancake oil?
That is not for making flapjacks. That's a brand of motor oil. I'm reasonably certain that's what that is. Here's another one. The ones on Thursday, the 20th, it said mowed hay, and then those are the names, our little local names for two different parcels of property where that was done. One was for the neighbor's last name. One was for the fact they had a windmill up.
The heifer was out at 3 a.m.
They must have got a phone. They must have got a phone call about it. The neighbors must have called them at 3 a.m. What I thought was interesting was she mentions on the 21st that I and my two daughters came to visit, and sometimes she refers to my grandparents as G and G for granddad and grandma, and sometimes she refers to my grandparents as M and D for mom and dad. I don't know what it's just,
Interesting.
And I know she's crossed the G out. That was kind of odd. She crossed the G out and decided to call them M and D. I'm not really, but that is something we I look at that. I know exactly well because I'm in there, so I know what she's talking about. So those are things I would annotate. M and D means this. G and G means this. And there's not too many relatives in the ones because I took ones out. I didn't want to broadcast certain details, but that I would annotate who those people are, if it's the neighbors or something of that type. Because again, a lot of those things in there. She got her hair done. I'm surprised the name of the hairdresser is not listed there, but I didn't know that was. But a lot of those are they're interesting details. But I'm not going to transcribe all of those. But annotating that, if somebody wanted to look years later, they could see my annotations, and things make a little more sense.
So, Michael, people have, I think, some of the viewers talked about diaries and things, and those can be quite personal, right? And some personal things could be in these. And so, how do you protect your ancestor? I've seen, porn in people's stuff, and like what do you do to protect the people after they're gone, their personal things?
I think this is going to be a whole different quick start.
Yeah.
Just heading you off at the pass here.
Yeah, I really do. I think we need to devote a whole.
Yeah.
When the quick thing is when I go through, I share bits and pieces of these on my Facebook page and whatnot. When I share them, I am very judicious, like the ones we shared here. Either everybody was dead or it was very, very innocuous. And there's a few other things that are in those that I'm not going to share at this point. Eventually, yes, but at this point, no, because there's some living individuals. Nothing in these that I have are at the level of what you suggested. But there are a few details in there that I would personally wait to release.
So we also have a step 5 is to share the papers with others. And so let's run through our steps for prepping personal papers. Step 1 is to gather the available papers, family papers. Step 2 is to pick out a particular ancestor's material. So avoid overwhelm. Just choose one. Step 3 is then to preserve without tears. Take your time. You don't have to transcribe everything. You don't have to do citations, right? Like every single page, without tears. Step 4 is to annotate for future generations, something that would save them time, something that might not make sense. Step 5 is then to share the papers with others. So let us see. Mm. So thank you so very much for that quick start, and we'll see you later. If I let you go. No, I'm just kidding. Bye. All right, give me 1 second to let you see our beautiful next special guest. All righty, hello and welcome back to our second part of preservation. Today we just talked about preserving papers, and now we're going to talk about cemeteries. Our next special guest is a preservationist and a historian. And this is just letting you know, subscribe to our newsletter. Check it out. All right. Um, Today we have an extra special guest for me because she's local. And I was just so happy to find out that, she's full bore on researching people, digging into what was up, not just using books, but getting into what genealogists likes, the records. Okay. I want to bring on our special guest for today, Dolly Marshall. Hello, Dolly. How are you?
Chanel, how are you? I'm
Thank you
great.
so
Thank you
much.
so much.
Thank you for being here. So, Dolly, I don't recall if we talked about this, but I asked all of my guests, what's your 1 minute genealogy, history, historian story? How did you get started? And when did you know it's all over? I'm hooked. This is it. When did you know, Dolly?
Well, thank you so much for having me on your program. I'm so happy to participate and be here and share some great things that I've rediscovered with your audience. I just love being a preservationist and a historian, and I love cemetery preservation in particular because it's all about unearthing those hidden stories and really bringing them back to the forefront. It's really living history for me. So, to give you a kind of a short version of how I got
It's the
started,
1 minute version, Dolly.
it goes back to my childhood. I've always had an affinity for cemeteries. I've always had a respect for our collective ancestors. So I would say it started probably when I was probably about 10 years old and just paying respects in local cemeteries and going with my parents and being there, not finding them a scary place. Really, it piqued my curiosity, reading headstones, learning about people, and then my own ancestors going to visit and pay our respects. So that's where the seed was planted.
All right, hanging out with your parents. I love it. So today, Dolly has a fun, quick start. Because I said, Dolly, what do you want to do? And she just said, hey, why are they buried here? And I thought, oh, yeah, this is a question that we should all be asking. And so Dolly came up with the quick start: Silent Storytellers, a handbook for cemetery preservation. So, Dolly, what is this quick start about for you?
Basically, in a nutshell, this quick start is really to help people uh, start start their genealogy journey, and gives them a map and kind of a focus. I would say uh, a preserver, a life preserver, in which way to go. It's like I found out some interesting information. Where do I start? So it's all about locating your ancestor, or maybe if it's not an ancestor, might be a particular person you just find
Yes.
fascinating, you want to research, locating them in a cemetery. So we're going to kind of give you that in abbreviated version, easy as ABC.
Yes, and like you said, we start with our ancestors, but because we get hooked up in it, we get, crazy and addicted to it, we
Mhm.
end up doing like you're
Um,
doing whole cemeteries. I was over hanging out in Mount Peace with people who have nothing to do with me, but I needed to know all of their business in their lives. So,
right.
yes. So, let's get started with Dolly's quick start. Silent Storytellers, a handbook for cemetery preservation. So, let's start with step one, and that is to locate the burial location of your ancestor. So, what are some of the ways that people can find the burial location of their ancestor? Because we struggle sometimes with that.
Right.
Sometimes it's easy as a layup
Right.
as one record, but sometimes not. So, what are the
Mhm.
easy ways to find a burial location?
Sometimes it's very difficult because a lot of times it's not common knowledge that, such and such ancestor was buried here or interned here. So you kind of have to do some detective work. So I
Yes.
would say the most easy or readily available way to assess that would be an obituary, um, or a death certificate. So,
Yes.
or sometimes known as a death record. So,
Mhm.
those two things can really help with pinpointing a location of where the particular person was laid to rest. So, if you can go through a newspaper, you would start. First, you have to find out where your ancestor passed away, in,
Yes.
because that could totally take you in another direction, because it might not be a local place. So, say my ancestor's from
Mhm.
New Jersey, but my ancestor could have passed away in another state. So
Yes.
then you have to do some more digging and go through newspaper archives. So first you have to find where your ancestor passed away. So what state? So that will help you pinpoint what direction, what archives you're going to go looking for the obituary and the death certificate.
Fantastic. And of course, they're not always buried in the town that they're in, because Mount Peace
Mhm.
Cemetery, which is in Lawnside, which is New Jersey's only African American town. What's interesting about that cemetery is that there are people from all over South Jersey, Maryland, Philadelphia buried there. So it's not just the cemetery that's local to you.
Right.
So that's step one.
That's step
Let's
one.
move.
There's even
Let's
people that are buried from Africa in Mount Peace. So that goes to show you. That
Yes,
goes to show you
yes.
you have to, think outside of the box with your
You
records.
definitely do. Let's move on to step two. Step two is, are there burial records? So this is something that it seems hit or miss. So how do
Mhm.
you find out, Dolly, if there are burial records?
Sometimes that could be tricky because it depends on the cemetery. So, for instance, Mount Peace, unfortunately, the cemetery doesn't have an inventory of a complete set of burial records. So, you'll find that we don't have all the years of all the burials. So, from a 120-year period, we don't have 120 years worth of burial records. But if you're researching a cemetery that might have their burial records, then I would say you're at an advantage. But hope is not lost because there's ways to navigate that. So you want to start with your local historical society. That's a great place to start. So we already assessed what cemetery we're going to research. We found the cemetery that we're going to be
Mhm.
starting in. So you want to go to your local historical society and your local free public library, because that way those are two great places where you can start to find some burial records. So I'm going to use the historical society. There you can more than likely access burial records, because most of the historical societies in each town used to keep burial records, because it was a whole project during the 1930s called the WPA. It was a work project.
Yes.
So
Yes.
you'll be lucky. You'll, as a researcher, it's a great place to start because of those records.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's step Step two.
Yep, that's step two. And you have some, you have a lot. Dolly has a lot of records. We're going to go through the steps first, Dolly, and then we're
Okay.
going to go through your records.
Okay,
So
great.
after you figure out if there's some burial records there, unless there's a reason why you feel we should go through the records as we go through, then I'll do that. But step
Okay.
three is to use the headstone for clues to
Mm,
locate records. I love the headstones, especially when
me
they're
too.
soldiers and there's interesting stuff. So tell me what type of clues besides, we know possible birth year,
Right.
death. What other
Right.
types of clues could we find on a headstone?
There's so many different clues, what I call like hidden in plain sight type of clues. So we have symbols on headstones. We have another thing called epitaphs, and epitaphs are writings on headstones, might be a little poem, a little saying. We also have different materials or different types of headstones can also give us a clue of maybe what type of family that individual is from, or what type of organization, because the material is
Ah,
significant, whether it's
yeah.
granite or zinc
Mhm,
or
mhm,
a homemade headstone.
mhm.
So it's many clues. A lot of times, oftentimes, get overlooked on headstones because I
Yes.
think a lot of people are focusing more on the born date and the death date.
Yes. We get focused. We're so it's called it's like headstone blindness. I call
Right.
like those little first name, last name is blindness.
Right.
So
And
okay,
also look at
here
the back of the headstone.
look at the back. Okay,
Look at the
okay.
back. There's serial numbers sometimes. There's names
Oh,
of the manufacturer of the headstone.
okay, okay, fantastic. Next, step four is to research genealogical records. We're going to look through some of these. What are some genealogical? Well, we'll see those, so you don't have to tell us those now.
Okay.
Step five is to analyze and document your research. You're going to talk to us about how you analyze these different records. Let me show them now because I keep looking at them and I'm like, everyone needs to see these right now. So Dolly
Right.
has a lot of records, and we're going to zero in on some of these records, and you are going to tell us about these records. So these look like the cemetery records,
Yes.
burial records. Okay.
These are a variety of burial records. So, for instance, this is a grave registration record or a burial record. Usually, for older cemeteries, burial records were handwritten on index cards. So,
Yeah.
this is actually a photocopy of a handwritten index carded record, and it's for William Waters Hegeman,
Hegeman.
who
Yeah.
happens to be my great great grandfather. So, and so it has his, this is a very good record set because it actually gives pretty good details. It gives the burial date, date of death, the location of the cemetery, uh, that he was a war veteran, a Civil War veteran. It also gives his rank, his branch, and it gives a bit of a description of the location in the cemetery.
Nice.
At the bottom, you can see it says West Side, and it also lets you know if it's a government issued headstone or not.
Yes, yes. West Side. Go, Mr. Hegeman. All right, we have another one here. I'm getting turned around. Sorry. Hold on.
A lot of burial records, a lot of records. This is a death record. So I don't know if you can see the top. I might have cut off the top. I apologize. But it is a New Jersey death index. So each state, whether it's New Jersey, California, most states would do an index, and it's a listing of all of the individuals that passed away during a certain time span. It might be from 1950 to 1960, however it's grouped, and it'll give you all the people that passed away in alphabetical order that year or that time period in that state. And
And
you
who
can
publishes this? Where did you get this from, Dolly?
this is available on Ancestry or Family Search. It's called a death index.
Oh, okay.
Even if you
A
Google
death
it,
index of,
New
is it of,
Jersey. This one
okay,
is New
cool.
Jersey. But if you
Okay.
type in any
Yeah.
state death index, you'll get something, a record such as this, and it'll just give you a listing of the individuals that passed away during that time period. So you kind of have to narrow down the years of who you're looking
Yes.
for, because you're going to get a lot
Yes.
of death indexes.
Yes. I get the death index. I thought it was a special one. What do
Mhm.
we have here? What are these maps?
These are maps. These are burial maps of cemeteries. I just wanted to give the viewers an overview, your audience, how to use maps, because maps are also very important. They not only help you locate maybe burials, plots, but maps can also give you an overall general idea of the surroundings and locations. Like the bottom right is an aerial map. So it's important to not only look at the cemetery as itself, by itself, you also want to look at the surrounding community
Yes.
where the cemetery is located. That's very
Yes.
important to know about the different streets, neighborhoods, because a lot of things that were there might not be there presently, and vice
Anymore.
versa.
Anymore. What's this
This is
health department from of David Hegeman?
This is a death certificate. This is a death
Okay.
certificate. Just a sample, another example of a death certificate. This one is from the city of St. Louis, excuse me. So I just wanted to give you an idea of how death certificates look in different states. So this is from St. Louis, Missouri, and it's a copy of a death record. And at the bottom, it has the burial permit, because this in St. Louis, the health department is involved in cemetery burials and uh, for the individual. So you
I
get a lot
love
of
it. Month.
information. You get a lot of information from a death record.
Yes, I love that. The years, month, and days of age. I'm
Yeah.
not used to seeing that.
Yes, yes. Really broken
That
down
is,
into detail.
look at all of these different headstones. So tell
Yes,
us, there's some different, lots of different insignias on these tops of these
right.
headstones.
If I had to pick a favorite thing, it's hard to pick a favorite thing, but I love I love headstones, and just reading headstones, taking it back to my childhood, just reading inscriptions. But I wanted to pick some different ones so you can kind of see the variety of types. So the top left headstone, William S. Washington, is for a young man, and it contains an epitaph. And that's what I mentioned earlier.
Oh, I should have made that bigger.
Epitaph. So it has a lovely poem that I assume was probably written by his parents. And it has a beautiful poem at the bottom under his name and birth and death date. And in the middle, Jesse Harris. This is a really interesting headstone because it has the three chain links. And that's
Yes, what's that all about?
yeah, a lot of people might not know offhand what that represents. That is the symbol for the Independent Order of Odd Fellows. The
Oh,
Independent Order of Odd Fellows is a fraternal organization for founded in the UK by
yes.
men, and as the turn of the 19th century, um, there were other chapters that founded their own independent order of odd fellows, and this is an African American chapter. So the three chain links stands
Mhm.
for friendship, love, and truth.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
So the next time
I
you see
love
that
it.
in the cemetery, you'll know that's the
Now I
Order of
know.
Odd Fellows, FLT for short. The third on the top right, this is a Civil War style type
Yes.
headstone for veteran Benjamin Mundy. You can learn a lot from reading it. It gives his rank, his position. He was a steward in the U.S. Navy in the ward room. And I would look at that headstone and be like, what's the ward room? And doing some research, the wardroom is actually a room on a naval ship. So he was a
Okay.
steward. It's sort of like, if I could equate it to modern times, like a lounge slash mess hall. And what's
Okay.
interesting
Okay.
about that headstone, this Civil War type headstone has the engraved shield design. Can you see the shield?
Yes. Does that mean something when there's a shield?
Yes, that originally was an exclusive design for Civil War Union veteran soldiers, and those were the first headstones that were rolled out for Civil War veterans, Union soldiers. However, over
Okay.
time, that became such a heavily issued stone. That one is also design, I should say. That one is also used for Spanish American veterans, and you'll see that frequently in cemeteries.
Dolly,
But
what's this one on the lower right, the
the
far
lower
right?
the lower right is a zinc headstone. It's made out of zinc. So during the 1870s, zinc headstones became fashionable because they actually were a more affordable material than
Oh,
granite or marble to make a headstone. And what's fascinating about zinc, this is a really small headstone, so I don't know if the camera does it justice, but it's pretty small. But the fascinating thing about zinc is they actually, the patina, they wear very well. They stand, they stay pretty legible over time.
yeah, it looks amazing.
So as you can see, this Willie E. Boston passed away in 1913. So
Yeah,
that,
this looks great. Does that
yeah,
symbol at the top mean anything? Do you know?
yeah, it's like a sunburst design.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a sunburst. So it, uh, as far as I know, it's more like detail. It wasn't anything
Artistic.
artistic design. And then
Gotcha,
the one
gotcha.
on the far left is a homemade headstone.
I love it.
And I love these type of headstones because it's very artisan, it's very craftsman. You can really tell a lot about the person, because I assume a loved one, a family member, carved this out of hand,
Created this. I
created
love
this.
it because it makes you stop. You don't just keep walking when you see that stone.
No, it's beautiful. It's
And that
Daisy
one is
John.
in Mount Peace.
Yes. All of these
Okay.
headstones are in Mount Peace Cemetery in Lawnside. And in the middle is another Civil War type headstone.
Yes, I love those Civil War ones. So here we have some documents when we're talking about looking at genealogical documents. You want to talk about this one?
Yes, this is a registration card. So, for all you military buffs out there, you'll see registration cards a lot when you're doing research, and especially for veterans. This is a World War I registration card for William Oscar Hegeman, and it's important to really look at these registration cards because a lot of times they're 2 pages. So I want to make
Yes.
sure when you find these like inventoried on like Ancestry, make sure you click the arrow to the right because there's always a second page.
Yes.
So that's my little
Yes.
tip
And
there.
yes. And also that little clip in the bottom off the corner is telling you that they were African American.
Yes.
All right. He was a musician. What's
Yeah.
this that we have here? This is part of his enlistment papers.
This is an enlistment paper for a Civil War veteran. So
Okay.
enlistment papers are record sets that are very important to research because you can find not only the name of the veteran, but you can find where they enlisted and where they're from. You can find what their occupation was at the time when they enlisted. You can also find, you can see their signature, because most of the times
Yes.
they could read or write. You can get a glimpse of their signature. So it's a
And
lot
this
of,
is on fold 3, right?
you can find these on Fold 3, or you can find these on the National Archives website too. So if you type in
Okay.
enlistment records.
Okay. Fantastic. Let's see. I think I do have, yep.
Now, this is a page from the city directory. So don't
Okay.
sleep on the directories. My- One of my favorite record sets is looking at the yellow pages, or in this case, the white pages. But
Yes.
yeah, this is from the Camden City Directory, and this was probably circa like 1885. And you'll get a listing of all of the people. So you're looking for a particular ancestor. So here's my ancestor, halfway down on the right hand side. And you'll learn not only where they lived, what street their home was on. Sometimes you'll also learn where they worked. You'll get an address of
Yeah.
their
Their
business, their
occupation. Yeah.
occupation. Then you can see the other neighbors too in the
Yes.
vicinity.
Love these. Love city directories. Let's
Me
see what
too.
other documents here. Oh, so what are so let's see. Wait. I think you had so up here, tell it I didn't blow this one up,
Oh,
but
so
what is
up
this one up here?
that is actually a veteran census record from 1890. So if you're a researcher, you're probably well aware about the 1890 census.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
yes,
yes.
let's share with the viewers. The 1890 census, unfortunately, was destroyed in a fire in the archive, so it doesn't exist. I still kind of hold out hope that it's somewhere, someplace. I don't know about you. I kind of think it's going to appear, materialize one day, but
Yes.
in the meantime, there's partial census records for the year 1890. So I don't want people to feel that there's no record sets for 1890. There's partial record sets. And that one is a veterans 1890 census. So in 1890, all the Civil War veterans have a special census record.
All right, so that one's that one. And so, you gather all those records, you're analyzing these records. That's step 5. And maybe in those records, you might figure out why they're buried there. And then in step 6, of course, a preservationist would say become active in
Yes.
cemetery preservation. So I'm going to share some pictures, and you can tell us, how do you become active in cemetery preservation, Dolly?
Well, you just have to see where there's a need, and there's many needs in cemeteries because a lot of our older historic cemetery sites are non-active, which means they don't take in new burials. And without new burials, there's no money coming in to sustain them. So
Mhm.
you want to do different things like partner with your local um, volunteer organizations, your Rotary clubs, your Girl Scouts, your Boy Scouts, your fraternities, your sororities. There's many groups that are very involved in community service. Your veterans, these are student veterans of America in the top left-hand corner who came from all across the country to come and pitch in at Mount Peace. Contact your local high schools, middle schools, public schools, any
Mhm.
organization where there's people. And to become active, you just go out and show up and see what needs to be done, whether it's cleaning, picking up litter, helping to clean headstones, helping to give a tour. Anybody can empower themselves as long as they care about preserving the past.
Most definitely. All right, Dolly. Thank you. Let's run through your quick start. Thank you for that.
You're
So,
welcome.
Silent Storytellers, a handbook for cemetery preservation. First, you want to locate the burial location. Step 2, are there burial records? Step 3, use the headstone for clues to locate additional records. Step 4, research genealogical records. Step 5, analyze and document your research. Step 6, become active in cemetery preservation. So, Dolly, thank you so much. Jim and
Thank
Michael
you.
are coming back just so that we can wave goodbye in the 3 seconds that we have. Thank you for being here. Have a great night. Dolly, you did
Good
great.
night.
Don't go
Thank
anywhere.
you. Have a good night.